To tell you about the political picture in Wales, where Natasha Asghar, who's made history by becoming the first woman from a black or Asian minority ethnic background to be elected, a seat held by her father until his death last year. She's a Conservative. Of course, it's the whole picture there is still dominated by Labour. But in 2003, Wales was the first parliament in the world to reach gender parity, with women winning half of the seats. But now it's gone backwards, with the number of women elected this time around down on the last election. I spoke to Natasha and also Jess Blair from the Electoral Reform Society Wales just before coming on air. And I started by asking Natasha what it meant to win that seat following in her dad's footsteps.
It honestly feels amazing. I can't tell you the fantastic response that I've received, not just from members in my own constituency of South East Wales, but generally across the world. I've been congratulated by so many people. It's been a whirlwind of a few days, I must be honest with you. I thought I'd hit the ground running, but I seem to have been spending so much time on my social media and phone for the last few days. It's been incredible. So the feeling has been totally undescribable, but I'm truly elated to be in this position. And I certainly hope that it proves to be a positive change here in Wales.
Why do you think, though, it has taken so long to have somebody do this?
I think there have been a lot of issues in the past. It's one of the reasons why I got into politics. I think there's a common misconception that people don't actually understand the processes one has to go through politics. It seems a rather daunting job when people look at it from the outside in. We often hear and see about people being trolled. You often hear about politicians being, verbally abused in the street. It just seems to be a career that a lot of people sort of think to themselves, oh, it's just so much of a hassle. People want to go for a job where you think there's job stability. I grew up in a house where my mom was like, why don't you become a doctor or an engineer or a nice job where you don't have to stress yourself about having to reapply every few years for your job? But it's something that I'm passionate about. And I know the world has become such a big place where everyone loves to talk about politics, what's going on in the world. So there is a genuine desire, but it's our responsibility as politicians to ensure that we make as many people out there involved within politics, encourage them to get into it, understand the system, and eventually become parts of the system.
I mean, you've been trying to become a politician for some time. Is it right? You stood for general election. Is it twice?
Oh yeah, this is my sixth time. So I've done, let's start. So we've done 2 Welsh Assembly. This is when it was a Welsh Assembly. It's now a Welsh Parliament. 2 parliamentary, and even 1 European election as well. That was many, many moons ago. So this is my 6th one, and this was the regional one. So they say first time lucky, second time lucky. In my case, it's the 6th time lucky.
This is the 6th time at this particular post, as you're talking about. You're now a politician, and of course something it's run in your family, as we refer to with your father and even your grandfather, I believe, who was Labour, not Conservative. So an interesting whole other conversation we could have there. But just what has your job been before this? I understand you're a presenter or in the media. Tell us about what you did just before, in case people are thinking, well, maybe it isn't for me. How did you prepare for this?
So I actually went through a very strange route of getting into politics. So I did my actual BA and MA in politics from London. I then worked in finance for a few years. After that, I actually did work experience in BBC Wales, amazingly, and continued working in media. I then eventually hosted my own chat show for 4 years, which did really well on a channel called ZTV. Moved on from channel to channel with doing lifestyle shows and all sorts. And whilst I was doing that, I was actually keeping my hand in the pie of politics as well. I was working part-time within the Senedd and travelling back and forth. And I have worked previously in London Parliament alongside European Parliament too. So I have got a variety of experience. And prior to just joining Senedd, and in fact, just up until a few days ago, I've been working for a PR firm creating government ads. So all the ads for the ethnic minority channels that you see, whether they be in Hindi, Punjabi, Urdu, sometimes even Farsi, so that members of the ethnic minorities are aware of the messages coming out regarding COVID. So the first one was about the vaccine, the second one was about track and trace, and the third one shall be out shortly, hopefully.
This is something you've obviously wanted very badly, but you're part of a party, certainly in Wales, which isn't the majority. You're in opposition. Do you think there could ever be a time when the Conservatives take Wales? We've seen, of course, what's been going on around the rest of the United Kingdom.
Emma, I'll be very honest with you. I've learned one thing in life: never say never. Because something, I've said that many a times, and the complete opposite has always happened. So you never know what the future holds for the Conservatives in Wales. And honestly, having seen the results that have come through, we had none of our seats lost their targets. We've increased our members within the Senedd, which is absolutely fantastic on behalf of the Welsh Conservatives. And the candidates that actually stood have actually increased the number of votes that they've had in previous years. So I think it is actually a success this time round.
Yes, but I mean, from the point of view, it's still Labour. That's what the Welsh people want, and it's an important point to make. And there's something very deep there, it seems, and it's just how you start to look at that and make an impact. We'll come back to you in just a moment. Let's welcome Jess Blair from the Electoral Reform Society Wales. Jess, in terms of women, the success of Wales was at the forefront really in terms of gender parity, and it's gone backwards.
Absolutely. So in 2003, Wales broke records, essentially, having the first 50-50 gender-balanced parliament, or assembly as it was in those days. This time round, we've gone down to 26 women, which is a sliding backwards a little bit on where we ended the last Senate term. And it's a result, I think, of female incumbents standing down and male-only races largely in those seats. It's a real shame.
And so that's the explanation that you see. Is there a way then, for instance, does there need to be, because you've had it before, a correction to it? Or do you just think we're now at a stage where it will even out again? Or do you think there has to be concerted effort?
Well, I think the reality is that the reason Wales has done relatively well in terms of gender equality, definitely not in terms of other areas of diversity, is because parties have used positive action around gender. So the Labour Party at a time, Plaid Cymru also did. And with Plaid Cymru not using it anymore, we have seen that slip back. So what we need are legislative statutory quotas built in our electoral system.
That's what you want to see?
Yeah, absolutely. This should be taken out of parties' hands, I think. It's really important that people in Wales see a parliament that reflects them, and that's in terms of gender, race, ethnicity, sexuality, age. There's so many things that we can be doing to address, and I think we need to start with gender quotas to get the foundations in.
Natasha, what do you make of that? Is it necessary?
I personally believe in a system of meritocracy. I completely accept where Jess is coming. Change needs to happen. And I put my hand up and say, we as politicians sitting there right now have a responsibility to do that. But one thing I've seen it on both spectrums. I've actually seen the system of meritocracy work. I know that there's a common conception that, the parties out there just simply seem to have, white middle-aged men predominantly ruling the roost. But I have to say, things are going to take a bit of time to change. I know we live in such a diverse society, but to change the system, I'm sorry to say, does take time. I have, like I said just a second ago, sat on the other side where I have actually witnessed a system where it's been a women's first, as they call it. So regardless of what happens, a female candidate will be the first on potentially the list or as selected as a candidate. And I'm very sorry to say, and I'm not against women in this, but I sat in that panel, I sat there in front of them, and I saw a female candidate and a male candidate go up against each other, and hand on heart, and I mean this with all honesty under the sun, the male candidate was better. He genuinely spoke better, he was articulate, he presented himself better, but due to that particular rule, he wasn't given the seat. And I have to say that made me very, very sad, because I don't want people who are really capable to miss out on it. I understand the need for diversity. I completely accept it. There needs to be a change, but also I do believe that the parties should be responsible for the candidates that they put forward, because ultimately they are the ones who have to support that candidate through their career. And that support is pivotal in getting them elected and ultimately ensure that their safety from a party perspective is maintained with their party as well.
Jess, what do you make of that? A very decent male candidate missed out.
I think that male candidates have obviously had a big chance. There were the majority of men in the Senedd currently. There were last time round in our local government in Wales, just 28% of councillors are female. So I think men have had a good chance over the last few years. And we see existing quotas essentially in places like the House of Lords, where seats are reserved for male heirs. So I feel like it's not that radical of a suggestion to say that perhaps we should put in place measures to help gender equality and diversity.
No, but the point I'm sort of asking is what do you make of this specific? Of course, we know about how the system has been stacked and continues to be stacked for the years to come, it seems. But that very specific idea that you are going to get potentially at times a worse candidate.
I think we need to look at it in the context that often there are massive barriers to women standing. So we did some work a couple of years ago and we spoke to women who've been candidates who just said, look, we are at a disadvantage here because, for example, this one individual had caring responsibilities and couldn't make the kind of normal processes of party selection. So I just think it has to be looked at in the round, and you'll have individual cases in kind of each respect, really. And it's just to make sure there's a level playing field, really, rather than putting women at an advantage or men at an advantage.
Jess Blair from the Electoral Reform Society Wales, and before that, Natasha Asghar on her electoral success.